The row about that Labour attack ad is still going on. Yes, I'm talking about the claim by Starmer's party that Rishi Sunak doesn't want child rapists put in prison. It's the debate that never ends, and Lisa Nandy and John McDonnell were the latest politicians to go head-to-head on whether the advert was a good idea.
I think it's important that we debate the issue, hard debate of the issue, because it's so fundamentally important. Lisa's right on this. But let me just say, I know you, Lisa. This is not you. This is not you. You never go for the person in this individual way. You go for the facts and you go for the policy issue. Whoever, the facts are there, but the reference with regard to Rishi is unacceptable. And take Michelle Obama's advice. When they go low, and that's exactly what Braverman did, and Rishi has done as well, we go high. We're better than them. And you know that, and you are as well.
Can I just gently say to you, John, first of all, I don't accept that the Prime Minister of this country shouldn't take responsibility for this.
No one's arguing that. But do you honestly believe that Rishi as a parent doesn't believe child abusers should be
that you were a senior member of the Labour Party when we were found to have breached equalities law by the Equality and Human Rights Commission and brought us to our lowest point in our 100-year history. So I will not take lessons from you about civility and politics.
I'm not trying to lessen you or anything like that. All I'm saying is, because on that issue we did address it and we held our hands up to go address it as well, including me, and I apologise. But on this, you don't do this. This is not Labour politics. We're better than this. And we can argue and win the case without personalising it around an individual that way, because it undermines our argument.
Well, at least Nandy annoyed me. I mean, to be honest, I feel like that was just an annoying clip in general, actually. It's been viewed like 500,000 times on Twitter, so it's clearly struck a chord with lots of people. But this idea that EHRC report was the lowest point Labour have ever been in. The EHRC, as we've been talking about, especially in relation to trans rights, actually, it's a very politically motivated organisation. And when you see what laws was Labour supposed to have broken, one of them amounted to Ken Livingstone and a councillor saying something on Twitter, or Ken Livingstone saying something on the radio. And the other one was that Labour dealt badly with anti-Semitism complaints because it was all a bit of a mess. Now, we spoke at the time. Yeah, it was a mess, right? They should have dealt with those complaints a little bit better, or the whole thing could have been managed better, right? But the idea that that's a lower moment than illegally invading Iraq is just like, these people are on cloud cuckoo land. It's obviously, I think, cynical. Obviously cynical. And this idea that the EHRC, because if the EHRC says you're bad, that's the lowest you can possibly go. Like, no, these are people who are appointed by the Tory government. Does that mean we should ignore everything they say? Absolutely not. But does that mean that we should question when someone says, oh, this is the lowest moment for this political party because the EHRC has said they've done something wrong? No.
I think it's really instructive because it shows you the role of the EHRC report and how it's been politicised, and as well as how the anti-Semitism crisis has been weaponised. It's been used to neutralise and shut down any discussion of other forms of racism in the Labour Party. Now, the thing about that Labour attack ad, where they plastered Rishi Sunak's face and added his signature, claiming that he doesn't think that child sex offenders should go to prison, that, of course, comes after a solid week where the news is totally dominated by grooming gangs in which the offenders are South Asian. So if we're looking at the way in which allegations of anti-Semitism played out under Jeremy Corbyn, people talked a lot about tropes. We talked a lot about tropes where even if something explicitly anti-Semitic hadn't been said, even if there wasn't any explicitly anti-Semitic imagery, it could be seen as an act of anti-Semitism because it played into a wider negative view or conspiracy theory or smear about Jewish people. One really memorable allegation of the trope was when I believe it was Marcus Wadsworth had accused Ruth Smith of leaking to the right-wing papers. And the response to that was, oh, it's a trope about Jewish people. Now, I don't actually think that was a trope, but that was enough to get him expelled from the Labour Party, despite being a lifelong anti-racist. Now, that threshold and that way of understanding racism, it applied to anti-Semitism, that something was a trope. But when you've got a South Asian Prime Minister being accused of not wanting child sex offenders to go to prison in a week where the news is dominated by grooming gangs, where the offenders are South Asian, and he wasn't even an MP for many of the years from which the data has been calculated, you'd go, well, that's definitely a trope. That's definitely a dog whistle. That's definitely trying to play into the prejudices which have been engendered by the Conservative Party. They're the main offenders here. The prejudices regarding people from an Asian background and child sexual offences. That was the standard. But no one's talking about that. No one's able to even break into that conversation because of the existence of the HRC report, because of the anti-Semitism crisis. Because if you try and talk about anti-Blackness or Islamophobia or forms of racism against Asian people or racism against the GRT community in Labour, you are just hit with, well, the EHRC report, anything you say is whataboutery. You're just trying to distract from the real issue, which is anti-Semitism. I don't have to trust a single word you say on these other forms of racism. I mean, that was something which I was basically hit with, which is when I was trying to talk about forms of racism and politics live in Labour, the only response I got back was to do with anti-Semitism. And that is a totally cynical political maneuver. It's got nothing to do with the thing which is really serious, which is tackling racism against all communities, wherever you find it. It's about using the way in which a narrative has developed around one particular kind of racism from one particular kind of alleged perpetrator and using that to snuff out and smother any other kind of anti-racist activity.